Evening fell as Haesu walked slowly up the cold concrete stairs, her long brown coat swaying gently with each step. When she stood before the old wooden door of the apartment, her hand lifted, then paused, searching for the key in her pocket. The door creaked open, and a reddish-pink light spilled out from inside, like a harsh streak of color cutting through the darkness. On the floor lay scattered shoes, white sneakers, and red high heels side by side, in a jarringly misplaced pairing. Empty bottles rolled beneath the low table, the smell of alcohol mingling with the suffocating heat. Haesu stood at the threshold, one hand resting on the wooden frame, her body frozen in place. The space inside was drowned in the glow of an old television, its screen flickering in shades of red and pink. Soft sounds drifted outward, hurried breaths, vague movements blurred in the crimson light. Her heart pounded so violently it almost hurt. She could not remember where she had seen such a scene before, in a film, perhaps, or some late-night program. She stepped further into the room, her eyes wide in shock. It felt like a terrible dream descending upon her, strange, yet terrifyingly familiar. Then the scene vanished. Haesu jolted awake in the staff break room of the restaurant, sitting on a small round stool against pale green tiled walls that felt just as cold. Still, dazed, she looked down at the floor and realized she had dreamed it again, the dream where she caught her husband with another woman. The phone in her hand lit up. Her break was almost over. Haesu stood and pushed open the glass door, returning to the kitchen. The middle-aged manager approached her, handing her a thick envelope. When he explained it was an advance on her salary, she bowed deeply, gratitude rising in her chest. He said she was practically family, and those words made her heart ache for in her real family. She had never once felt that way. Work carried her through the entire evening, ringing up bills, serving beer, grilling meat, a smile fixed on her lips despite her aching feet. She watched young couples teasing each other, feeding one another bite by bite, and found herself thinking that love made people glow. When one is young, there is enough courage to love and to throw oneself in completely. And what about her, a woman past her youth, wondering if anyone still found her life beautiful? In the changing room, a coworker teased her about being called egg, pinched her cheek, and insisted she was still pretty. Haesu only smiled faintly and slipped on her coat to leave. Night fell as she once again climbed the long staircase between towering buildings, her small figure swallowed by the streetlights. The semi-basement apartment greeted her with a familiar smell of alcohol. Her husband sat slumped on the floor, a pot of noodles and empty soju bottles before him. He let loose complaints, criticizing her appearance and grumbling about money. Haesu remained silent, wondering whether she had withered with time or was simply exhausted from endless days of work to fill an empty bank account. Amid his bitter words, she found herself thinking about the price of cosmetics, about how he had never once been willing to spend even a small amount on her. Their love was like this damp room, worn out, cold, and slowly losing its warmth. He dropped his chopsticks, losing his appetite, while she sat there, hollow, wondering whether she should blame him or blame herself for choosing to love him in the first place. Old memories drifted back, their wedding anniversary, the early years struggling alone to build a home, and the day he fell to his knees, apologizing for the mountain of debt. When she learned the money had been borrowed under her name, she neither cried nor screamed. She only felt empty, thinking that if she worked hard enough, she would eventually repay it all. Indeed, almost every second of her life belonged to work. The barbecue restaurant, the motel front desk, the flower shop. Her schedule was so packed that even a young girl once gasped in disbelief. Yet sometimes, when holding a single rose in her hand, an unexpected wave of emotion would rise within her, making her want to cry. The burden of debt was still there. But the first thing to disappear had been her husband's love. One day, in the flower shop bathed in light, a tall man in a black coat walked in. The staff whispered, calling him the rose guy because he came every day to buy one. Haesu watched him and smiled faintly, thinking how wonderful it was to be young. When he placed his phone on the counter and tapped it lightly to get her attention, his gaze was deep and cold, yet carried a trace of profound loneliness. In that moment, amid the fragrance of flowers and the warm lights, Haesu suddenly realized she no longer longed for a blazing love. She only wished to find again the feeling of being seen, of being hurt like a withered flower still yearning for one last watering. And amid the silent tears of her life, she kept living, kept working, as if it were the only way not to collapse completely. Some people are born already standing beneath dazzling lights, walking in glory beside gleaming luxury cars. Others remain in a faint stretch of shadow, passing through life without leaving any remarkable trace. Haesu had always believed she belonged to the latter. Sometimes, in the middle of those absent-minded thoughts, Haesu's eyes would unconsciously drift to the side. In the corner sat a young man with black hair, settled into an armchair. He stared intently at his phone, relaxed in posture, radiating a distant air. As for Haesu, her hands held a pair of scissors, carefully trimming each branch and leaf. She told herself that the man who often bought roses, he came every day, tall and quiet, standing silently before the counter. She handed him the bouquet with a familiar gesture, their hands brushing lightly for the briefest moment. Yet that very moment made Haesu's heart tremble softly, like a fragile string pulled taut. Haesu's co-worker did not miss that detail. The young woman excitedly repeated how the man only came on weekday mornings when Haesu was working and never spoke to anyone else. Haesu merely smiled faintly, startled to realize that, for months, she had truly arranged the same bouquet style for the same person every morning without ever paying attention. She mocked herself, saying he was at least a decade younger, while she was already a middle-aged woman, a faded flower. How could someone like him possibly like her? Her co-worker insisted otherwise, claiming his eyes always followed Haesu, that nowadays it was not uncommon for young men to prefer older women. Haesu only shook her head, hugging the bouquet wrapped in newspaper, lowering her gaze to the rose petals, as if looking at herself. She recalled the rare compliments she had received in life ironically, from her co-worker rather than the man she had married. And each time she was praised, what she felt was not joy, but embarrassment, for she knew it was merely comfort offered to a withering flower. That evening, Minchil, her husband, came home looking exhausted, tossing his shoes onto the floor. He asked for water before heading to shower. She quietly picked up the clothes he had thrown about, listening to the steady sound of running water behind the bathroom door. Night fell. Night fell. They lay beside each other but turned away. The distance between their bodies measured not in skin but in silence. Minchil reached for her, his voice tinged with teasing about the soft curves her body still held. But Haesu lay still, eyes open to the empty space, fatigue seeping through her entire body. When he complained that she was cold, she only whispered that she was a little tired, nothing more. The next morning, at exactly 6, Haesu woke up. She prepared a fresh breakfast, boiling a pot of soup, still steaming because Minchil refused reheated food. Yet she herself left home on an empty stomach to make it to work on time. Her footsteps echoed on the old staircase, the early wind chilling her spine. In the flower shop, her stomach growled softly, but she told herself she could wait until noon. When the rose buyer stepped in, the bell above the door chimed brightly. Haesu lifted her head, forcing a professional smile. He ordered 10 roses again, as usual, his deep, slow, courteous voice making her heart quiver. As she bent down to print the receipt, her stomach suddenly growled loudly. Haesu's face flushed with embarrassment, wondering if he had heard it. She hurriedly handed him the receipt, inviting him to sit and wait, but her eyes did not dare meet his. Later, she saw him leave in a luxurious car beside another well-dressed person. The sense of distance within her became even clearer. But then, she realized the sandwich box he had left behind on the counter. Without thinking, Haesu grabbed it and ran after him, calling out in the middle of the street. He turned back, smiling, saying it was a gift for her. When she hesitated to accept it, he stepped closer, offering her even the still warm cup of coffee. That gentle gesture left Haesu frozen in place, her heart pounding so hard she could not even think.